Are you bloated or is it belly fat? These are actually two very different things that have completely different solutions. I'm breaking down the differences between these two and how you can stop both of them in today's video. All right guys, if you're new to my channel and you don't know who I am, my name's Autumn and I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance. On my channel, I'm typically talking about the science-backed and holistic methods that you can use in order to achieve your wellness dreams. So if you have a wellness goal in mind, make sure you subscribe. Now first, what is bloating? Bloating is not weight gain. That's the first thing that we really need to make sure we're clearing up. Bloating is also not water retention. What bloating is trapped gas in your GI tract. And if you're on a weight loss journey and you're using measurements in order to track your progress, experiencing bloating can really make it seem like your measurements are a lot larger than what they are. And this is really evident, especially if you are on a weight loss journey and you see your body fat percentage is going down, but your measurements are going up. This is where there could be that discrepancy of bloating as an issue. Now, bloating and the trapped gas that's associated with bloating are typically caused by bacteria that's fermenting your food. Bacteria will munch on certain foods a little bit more than other foods as it's passing through your GI tract. And as a byproduct of the well-fed bacteria, you essentially get these little bacteria farts that get trapped in your GI tract. Super sciencey way of explaining it. And this gas that's released by the bacteria from the fermentation of the food that's going through your GI tract is what causes you to feel that bloating or that distension of your belly. Okay, so what about belly fat? What's that? Belly fat, on the other hand, is weight gain that you specifically get around your belly. This means that the fatty acids are specifically getting stored in fat cells around your belly. This is not a form of gas like we have with bloating. And belly fat can have a few main driving factors. The first comes down to genetics. Where our body chooses to store fat is largely dependent on our genetics. For example, some people will just naturally gain weight in their butt and thighs versus others who might gain weight in their abs and in their arms. With this genetic component in mind, any amount of weight gain will lead to weight gain around the belly if you have that predisposition of that genetic component of weight gain to your belly. But this also doesn't mean that genetics is the only cause of weight gain around the belly. Now, another really important factor to belly fat production is the hormonal aspect. Studies have found that higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol actually leads to weight gain specifically around the belly. Now, cortisol is our fight or flight hormone, and we naturally release higher amounts of it in the morning to help us get the energy to get up and get going. But then naturally, cortisol is supposed to decrease steadily throughout the day. But when we start to stimulate that cortisol production later in the day or all throughout the day so it stays high, that's when we get the issues of weight gain specifically around the belly. And that higher level of the stress hormone can be caused from a multitude of factors ranging from too much caffeine or having coffee too late in the day, perhaps overtraining or not sleeping enough, or just overall a very stressed lifestyle. Now, the speculative reason of why it is that cortisol causes that weight gain is because cortisol's main job when you're in that state of stress is to make sure that there's more glucose in your blood supply so that you have energy to get out of a dangerous situation. Now, of course, if you have just short bursts of cortisol, like if you are in a stressful situation or if you're working out and you have a well-balanced routine, this is perfectly fine and normal. But if you're in that higher stress state all day and if you're constantly dumping in that blood glucose as a result of that increased cortisol level, that's when some problems with weight gain around the belly can occur. Because with that elevated blood glucose level from that stress hormone, here comes into play that storing hormone, insulin. And insulin is the really important hormone that we want to consider when it comes to achieving an overall weight loss goal. Because when insulin is high, our fat burning is shut off and we're in that storing mode instead. And it appears that when we have this cortisol insulin connection, that's when we get the weight gain specifically around the belly, even if you don't have that genetic predisposition of gaining weight around the belly. So clearly there's a big difference between bloating and belly fat. Bloating is largely a shorter term response to foods that you're eating right in that moment, or it could be more chronic response if you have issues like SIBO or IBS that cause your body to have that excess gas production and cause that sensation of bloating. Now, belly fat, on the other hand, is that physical storage of fat specifically around the belly, which of course has multiple causes with genetic and weight gain or with that stress and hormone connection of weight gain. So first, how do you stop bloating? Getting rid of bloating is a multi-step solution, but one of the most impactful things that you can do right away is stimulating something called your migrating motor complex, or your MMC. Sounds very complicated, but I promise you it's very simple. The MMC is essentially just a series of contractions and secretions that your small intestine and your stomach make in order to flush out that left behind food and bacteria that would typically cause bloating. So the more that we can stimulate that MMC, the more that we can flush out the food and bacteria that's causing you to feel bloated in the first place. Now, here's the thing you have to remember about the MMC. It's stimulated by not eating. And specifically, it needs at least 3 hours and 45 minutes of not eating anything or not drinking anything other than water in order to go through a full cycle. if you eat anything during that 3 hours and 45 minutes, that's where you can stop the MMC and you're at risk of causing bloating. Now, there's two ways to go about this stimulation of the MMC. You can either use a 3-meal structure where you're inherently going to have at least 4 hours in between your meals and you're not snacking between those meals, or you can use intermittent fasting. With intermittent fasting, you're inherently getting that MMC stimulation by just simply not eating first thing in the morning. Both of these methods will stimulate your MMC, so it's really just about finding what it is that's going to work for you. And I do have a whole video on breaking down these differences of how you can stimulate your MMC and your options that you can check out right here. And if you're wondering if you can count sleeping as your not eating time period, it looks like the MMC is really significantly slowed down when you're sleeping. So for best results, especially if you are really experiencing a lot of bloating, you wanna make sure you're stimulating your MMC when you're actually awake. Okay, now that bloating is covered, how do we stop belly fat? Now, putting genetics to the side, because of course that's not something that we can control, it's important that we take a look at that hormonal aspect of belly fat, that cortisol and insulin connection. What we wanna do, first things first, is make sure that we can help to naturally balance that cortisol level. So that's having higher levels in the morning and allowing it to slowly decrease throughout the day. Because higher levels of cortisol lead to that higher amount of weight gain around the belly, we want to decrease and balance those cortisol levels in order to reduce the incidence of weight gain around the belly. Here are 3 things you can do to help balance those cortisol levels. First, stop your caffeine intake by 12 p.m., which I just want to note, it is 10:16, so I still have my coffee. Cheers to that. Now, caffeine and coffee can be a really great add-on in your diet. It's something that I really like to use. But if you have too much caffeine or if you have it too late in the day, that's where it can start to spike your cortisol levels when we want cortisol to be lower. So in order to achieve that cortisol balance, that's where you want to just make sure that you're limiting your caffeine intake when we naturally have those higher cortisol levels anyway, which is closer to the morning. Okay, the second, reduce your sugar intake. Now, this will help belly fat on 2 different fronts. Now, your decreased sugar intake will really help to decrease that fat storing hormone, insulin, which allows your body to turn on fat burning, which is called lipolysis. But decreasing your sugar intake can also help to naturally balance your cortisol levels as well, because one of the triggers of cortisol is low blood sugar levels. And it turns out that those higher intakes of blood glucose not only cause that big spike in blood glucose, but it also results in that crash in blood glucose levels as well, which anyone who's ever had a lot of cake or a lot of candy, like after a birthday party or Halloween, has experienced this crash. I mean, most of us will call this a sugar crash, which we know this intuitively, but this is also the science behind it. So by decreasing your sugar intake, you decrease the incidences of those blood sugar crashes so that cortisol won't be stimulated from that low blood sugar. Okay, the third, get outside. Now, there has been a study that found that spending just 15 minutes outside in some type of nature environment, even if it's an urban nature environment, can really help to significantly decrease our serum cortisol levels, which means our blood levels of cortisol. And this can be something as simple as walking outside on grass or going through a park if you live near one, or if you live by the beach or a lake, walking around that. All of those can be extremely helpful for bringing that cortisol level back down and helping to balance those levels. And if you are looking to lose belly fat, I highly recommend that you check out my 20 ways to lose belly fat without counting calories right here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out with new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.